All right. Again, welcome to all Girl Scouts in Colorado and across the country. If you're joining us from somewhere not Colorado, my name is Ashley Zugschwert. My camp name is Sky. I am the outdoor program coordinator at Girl Scouts of Colorado. With me today is guest speaker Cosmic, outdoor program staff at Girl Scouts of Colorado, and Aaliyah Cohen, equipment designer at the North Face. Some logistics to go over for this webinar. We are recording the session, like I mentioned. It will be posted to the Girl Scouts of Colorado YouTube page later. We are recording in speaker view, so the only faces that should show up will be my face, Cosmic's face, and Aaliyah's face. For how and when to use the chat box, please make sure to keep the chat box appropriate. Anyone who is entering anything inappropriate in that chat box will be removed from this session. Please make sure that all of your questions are going to me or one of my co-hosts, and make sure that the questions are all relevant to the session today. Today we're going to cover our Trail Adventure badge. We have some kind of higher level things to discuss, like backpacking, and we might touch on a little bit of some trail running stuff. Some reminders before we begin. After this webinar, once the recording is posted to the Girl Scouts of Colorado YouTube page, I will send a link to all who registered for this session to that recording. I'll send a link to the activity packet and a link to the badge request form where you can request your free badge and bandana by February 1st, 2021, after you complete your badge requirements. And just like with every Girl Scout meeting, we are going to start with our Girl Scout promise and law. So you can follow along with me. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. In our Girl Scout law, I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. Okay, we're gonna get everyone kind of involved right now. So I just released our poll. Please answer those questions. Which activity are you most excited about, hiking and backpacking or trail running? And then tell us in the chat box, what are your favorite trails to hike, backpack, or trail run? Give everyone a few seconds here. Okay, 5 seconds. If you haven't answered the poll, now is the time to do so. All right. I'm sharing the results here. It looks like most of you are excited about hiking and backpacking, which is great. That's a lot of what we're going to be covering today. We will touch a little bit on trail running. A lot of this stuff will be relevant to trail running as well. And thank you to everyone who entered their favorite trail in the chat box. All right, so step number 1 of the Trail Adventure badge is to choose your adventure. So some of you already said you're most excited about hiking and backpacking, or you're excited about trail running. There are some activities in the badge packets that can help you decide. Some of you may already know, or you might learn more from this session and have a decision by the end of this webinar. And I'm going to turn it over to Cosmic to talk about how to plan and prepare for your adventure.
All right, so in this section, I'm going to cover where to go, how to find trails, when to go, and safety. So next slide. Next slide, Ashley. Ashley, can you switch the slide? Thank you. Okay, cool. So where to go? I will kind of breeze through these because I'm sure a lot of you have planned at least some sort of small trip before with Girl Scouts, but some things you can ask yourself when you're trying to decide where to go is consider how far away from your house do you want to go? Do you want to go to maybe like a state park that's a little more local, or do you want to check out a really cool wilderness area? What do you want to see when you're doing a longer hike or backpacking trip? Oftentimes you're going to see something cool. So I've done backpacking trips where I've gone to see a lake that maybe I couldn't get to by just going on a day hike. Or would you like to explore somewhere new or somewhere you've been before? Again, if maybe you've spent a lot of time hiking, like in Rocky Mountain National Park, maybe you want to try backpacking there. That's the place I've been backpacking is I did a bunch of day hikes in Rocky, so then I tried a few backpacking trips there. And the thing about Colorado is there's no shortage of new places to go hiking, so that's one really cool thing about it. Next slide. All right, how to find trails. I love talking about finding trails. This is one of my favorite things. So I'm going to talk about all trails because all trails is probably one of the easiest way to find trails. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Oh wait, let me make sure I actually have it up. It's up, just a different tab. All right, great. I'm going to share my screen now. So I don't know how many of you have used all trails before, but it is probably the easiest thing to use when you're trying to find trails. You just go to whatever, like, I don't know if you guys use Chrome or you use, I don't know, literally anything. Just go to Google, type in all trails. It will bring you to all trails. You can create an account. It's free, or you can use it without an account. I always just go to this Explore tab, and it brings up a map, and you can set wherever it is that you want. So I used to live in Golden, so I'm going to look for hikes that are in or near Golden. So it takes you to wherever you selected, and then you can kind of hover over the map and look for trails. So since you guys are going to be looking for maybe harder trails or longer trails, you can kind of like set the length. So say I want to do something that's like between 8 and 12 miles. So it'll filter it for me. So, and then I can look on the side here and see like, oh, what kind of things are near me that are maybe between 8 and 12 miles. Or if you're going for, change my mind, I don't want to do that. Say you're going for elevation gain and you want to hit that like 2,000 feet in elevation gain minimum for the badge requirement for cadets. I'm going to go to like 2,000 to 3,000 feet. Oh, Beaver Brook Trail. That's a really good one. I've done part of that before. So then when you actually click on a trail, it gives you some information about the trail, when it's best to use, different activities you can do on this trail. And then I like this a lot, the elevation profile. You can kind of toggle along with it and like see, oh, how's the elevation change? One thing I do want to mention about all trails is it's not always the most accurate. And so I use all trails to get my like ideas for hikes. So say I've never done this trail before and I didn't know it existed. Awesome. I'm really glad I know about it now. But then I usually will go and like Google the name of the trail and make sure the information matches all trails. Sometimes they tend to underestimate the length of the hike. Which if you're doing a long hike and then it's actually longer than you thought it was, that's never fun, and I've had that happen before. So don't put all your eggs in one basket when you use something like all trails. Also, their easy, medium, hard rating is not the best. So I agree this trail is hard, but then people say it's good for running, but if you've never trail run before, it's not the best. So these are things to consider. This is why we look at a lot of different sources when we pick a hike. So Oh yeah, one last really good thing to take with a grain of salt, reviews on all trails. Sometimes they're really good, very technical hike, not for the inexperienced, would recommend plenty of water, a good pair of hiking boots. And sometimes they're like a little less helpful, or they're just nothing. So there's lots of different places to look for reviews of trails. All Trails is very subjective, I believe is the word. So take everything you see on All Trails with a grain of salt. Ashley, can you share the PowerPoint again? And I will talk about the rest of the things. Stop sharing. Sweet. So some other things, hiking project that is managed by REI, which is a outdoor clothing retailer, big in Colorado if you haven't heard of it. They have a lot of different websites, and one of them is Hiking Project. They have a lot of trails on there as well. I tend to have more luck with All Trails, just finding like every single trail, but some people really like Hiking Project. If you don't always have access to a computer or phone, you can get free paper maps from libraries and town visitor centers. All of the maps you see on the right-hand side of the screen are maps that I found in the Golden, Colorado Visitor Center. And I just walked in there and I took one of everything. So you can even see that really light blue one is just for Beaver Brook Trail. So if you're looking for like a longer trail to do near Golden, they have like a map that's just for that. Really cool. And you can always just Google the name of the county that you're in and open space parks, or you can do, state parks near me, national parks near me, stuff like that. The last thing I forgot to mention, CalTopo. CalTopo is great if you pick like a route on All Trails and then you want to check and make sure the distance is actually correct. It's pretty easy to use. I'm not going to go too much into it because we have a lot to talk about, but CalTopo is great. You can just go and find the hike that you want to do or the trail run, and you can map it out, and it tends to be a little more accurate, and then you can print or save like a digital copy of that PDF that you can use. So you make your own paper maps on CalTopo. Super fun. So next slide. When to go. I'm going to always recommend going early, especially if you're a cadet and you're looking to do that longer hike or trail run. Literally all times of the year, going early is the best. If you're backpacking, think about how many days you need to complete the route, and then take into consideration like what the weather might look like that weekend, and that might kind of affect when you want to start. Generally on the backpacking trips I've done, they're a little bit shorter usually, but I go on like a Friday afternoon, and then I hike a little bit and I camp, and then I hike some more the next day and come back, and then I hike back out. So afternoon hiking is a little different depending on what season you're doing. Always just check the weather before you go. Hiking early also gives you the benefit of like seeing really cool stuff. So these are both photos that I took on really early hikes. So yeah. And safety. So you should always, always, always tell someone who is not in your group where you're going, regardless of if you're hiking with one other person or 15. And you should always tell them what trails you're going to take. If you use CalTopo to make a handy map of your backpacking route, you can just print 2 copies and give one to the person outside of your group so they know exactly where you're going. You can set up emergency contacts on your phone. That's a super helpful thing. That's also helpful if you just lose your phone while you're hiking. So there's another thing. And again, just be mindful that you are in the outdoors. You can get sunburned, you can get dehydrated, bug bites, blisters. Those are all things. Sunburns, I won't cover this too much, but bring sun protection, whatever that looks like for you. Dehydration, always bring way more water than you think you need to. You would rather be the person who has too much water than not enough. Or if you're going on a backpacking trip, bring a cool way to filter it. I'm sure Leah will talk more about that in a second. Bug bites, just do some research on the trail you're about to hike beforehand, or if it rains the day before you're going to go on your hike or your trail run, there might be more mosquitoes than usual. If you're kind of worried about ticks, my recommendation is that you just stay on trail. I've never once in Colorado had a tick bite, and I don't tend to go off trail, but usually they like to hang on to like longer pieces of grass like you can see in this photo. So if you stay on trail, you're pretty good to go, but just check yourself for ticks afterwards. And blisters, if you're going on your super awesome like 10-mile hike and you just got new boots beforehand, maybe don't do that and wear them a little bit to break them in when you train. So, and I will talk more about training later. And that's all I have for plan and prepare. Does anyone have any questions? I know that was a lot.
Now's the time. If you have questions for Cosmic, please enter them in the chat box.
Ooh, I'm just gonna start reading them out. What should you bring in a first aid kit? I'm gonna save that one for Leah because she's gonna talk about gear, but that is a great question. It's something that we all should think about before we go on a long hike or trail run.
I have one here. What sunscreen do you recommend?
What sunscreen do I recommend? I use, oh, I don't remember. I'm actually gonna go get it while Leah's talking and then I will tell you guys because I think that would be easier than me trying to remember what it is, but I do have a recommendation. So I'll get it in a second.
Where do you draw the line between wearing boots and hiking sandals like Chacos?
Ooh, that is a really good question. It just kind of depends. If I'm going on like a shorter day hike that I know, like maybe it's in an area I've been before. So for example, I've been to Three Sisters Park in Evergreen a lot of times. If I'm going on like a 3-mile hike there and I know that the trail is not super rocky or rough, yeah, I might wear Chacos then. I do love my Chacos, I gotta say. Let's see, but I usually just err on the side of always wearing my hiking boots. I really like my hiking boots. I like to hike in them better than hiking my Chacos. And also when I hike in my Chacos, I risk like getting some sort of superficial wound to my foot. So like, you know, if I trip, I could drag my foot like on the ground. But if I trip in my hiking boots, I won't like gash my foot open. So if it's somewhere I've been, maybe Chacos, but usually just hiking boots. I got another one. Do combat boots work? Because I have some of those, but not hiking boots. I am going to highly recommend hiking boots, and I believe Aaliyah is going to talk a little bit more about them. But definitely for shorter stuff, you could wear something like that. And I know not everyone always has access to like fancy hiking boots. I do gotta say, my first pair of hiking boots that I got them at the thrift store for $13. Yes, they broke in the middle of my backpacking trip, but I had duct tape, so it was okay. And then I got a nice new pair afterwards. But I got like hundreds of miles in on that first pair of thrift store hiking boots that were $13. And I loved them very much. So you can go to thrift stores and look for a cheaper pair of hiking boots. They are hundreds of dollars. Yes, they are. There are some cheaper options out there as well, but yeah, sometimes they can be very expensive. So yeah, my first pair of hiking boots that I got that wasn't from the thrift store was under $100, and trail running shoes tend to be less expensive too, and those work for a lot of people. So does anyone have any more?
1 or 2 more questions if you have any, Cosmic.
Someone says Poshmark has some good used shoes. I believe that. I've never used it, but thank you for the tips.
All right, I'm going to wrap us up.
Awesome. Thank you for the questions, everyone. I'm going to go find my sunscreen.
Oh,
don't look.
so
Don't
far.
look.
All right, we're back on track. Almost. Okay, everyone, we're going to turn it over to Aaliyah Cohen. She's coming to us from the North Face, and she's here to talk to us about gear.
I'm on mute. Hi, everybody. My name is Aaliyah. I'm going to share my screen. Just a little bit about me. I am a designer at the North Face. I design our gloves and headwear. If it's outside, I like doing it. My favorite activities include surfing, rafting, skiing, and mountain biking, and of course, hiking and backpacking. And I do dabble in trail running a little bit, but it's definitely not my forte. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about what to pack on your trail trips. So whether you're trail running, going for a day hike, or backpacking, the first thing you want to do is always to think about the conditions. So the conditions of your trip include how long is your trip, how difficult is your trip, what the weather is going to be, and who am I going with. There's probably some other conditions I've left out, but essentially the conditions will help to inform you on what type of items to bring. So for example, going for a 2-mile trail run, you might not need 2 liters of water, but you will need that for a 4-mile hike where you're doing a lot of elevation change. So we already talked about a lot of great resources to check out, like where you want to go hiking or backpacking. And then there are equally helpful resources to check in on weather and terrain and look at the maps and see how difficult this trip really is going to be. So I'm going to start by talking about the essentials because these are obviously the most important things for you to pack. These are the items that you cannot live without and they have to go with you. Keep in mind that you're going to have a different set of essentials for trail running versus hiking versus backpacking. So starting with hydration, the general rule is you need a liter of water for every 1.5 hours to 2 hours you'll be out on the trail. And this obviously changes depending on how thirsty you are, how hard you're working, if it's hot outside. So this is just a general rule of thumb. I put some examples here to show kind of like what I would select for these activities. But once again, this is very personal. So if I'm going for a 30-minute trail run, I probably won't bring any water. The reason why is because it's annoying to carry, and if I get thirsty, I'm close enough to the trailhead that I can just turn around and come back. If I go on a 3-hour hike, I actually drink a lot of water, so I will bring 2 liters of water. And so showing the Nalgene here is just to show you that a Nalgene is 1 liter of water. It's also really great to have a Nalgene or a similar bottle with those markings on it if you go backpacking, because if you do any cooking around the kitchen, it's 4 cups of water per Nalgene, which makes doing recipes really easy. At the bottom here is a couple of other hydration options for you. The Nalgene is obviously a great and really inexpensive bottle. It also is non-crushable and it won't break. They also have a version that isn't see-through, that's made out of a slightly different material that's a little bit more bendable. And that's actually a great option if you're going for something ultra lightweight. So it's not quite as durable, but it is even lighter than these clear bottles. I have a Hydro Flask here just to represent a thermos in general. I love on a cold fall hike to make hot cocoa in the morning. You put it in your thermos, anything insulated, and then midway through your hike, you can warm up with some toasty hot cocoa. And then we also have a run vest there, which is a great option for trail running. And I've even used my run vest on like an hour-long hike. It's just a nice way to not have to carry a water bottle, and it's super light and comfortable. And then I also have a hydration pack there. And this is just something I should have noted at the beginning. You're going to see a lot of examples of products on these pages. It's really important to remember that it doesn't really matter what the brand is and how expensive it is. A lot of these things you can just reuse, things that you have at home. I'll talk about cookware later, and I've brought just a plastic fork from a takeout container that I had. You don't need a fancy titanium spork. Here I have a little spread of different water filters that you could use. So if you're staying overnight, you're going to want to bring a filter system with you. So we have pump systems, which basically you put this valve in a river or water source, and you have to pump the water up the tube and into your container, your water bottle. We also have gravity filters, which filter large amounts of water, but very slowly. So you fill the bag with water, you hang it from a tree, and you let the water drip through the filter. And then we have bottle filters, which are great for immediate drinkable water, but they're really slow because they're very small. So you'd have to do it over and over again to get enough water. So essentially you fill the bottle with water and you have to squeeze the bottle through the valve in order to filter it. And then at the bottom, I have iodine tablets, which I always have when I go backpacking. They're kind of like a plan B if my filter is broken or I forgot to bring my filter. Iodine tablets can treat water and make it drinkable. The only issue with them is that it's a bit expensive. And then also it takes a really long time. So it can take 30 minutes to an hour for the water to be clean and drinkable. And it's totally normal and healthy, but this does make your water like a yellowish color and often stains your containers. So just a heads up. Next essential would be food. I've just put a bunch of my favorite backpacking and hiking foods there. Essentially, you want food that is not perishable and not crushable. I say not perishable, but I've literally brought like a yogurt parfait on a 2-mile hike, and it's totally fine as long as you have it in a non-crushable container. Things like macaroni and cheese is great for dinners, because it's easy. You just boil water and cook the pasta, add the powdered cheese. Oatmeal similarly is great in the morning. One of my favorite tricks is buying things like this Tasty Bite in the top left corner or something similar, where it's just packaged food and you can just like dunk your spork in and get at it without having to cook anything. Yeah. In order to cook food, you're going to need to bring basically a camping kitchen with you, and the most important part of your kitchen will be your stove. So I actually have what you see on the left, which is a simple fuel canister that screws into the bottom of a very lightweight stove, which you see in the middle, and then on the top is just like a simple titanium pan. This is super lightweight. It does cook things slower, but I like the simplicity of it, and it's not very expensive. And then there's also like full-on, more expensive, but very convenient cook systems where everything's kind of integrated. And so you can see that in the Jetboil. Both of these options work great, and I've used both of them, and yeah, there's pros and cons to both options. In order to eat, you're going to need some kitchenware. So for prepping, you'll want a knife that has a sheath on it. I've used a short kitchen knife and used cardboard box and duct tape to protect the blade. Whatever you do, if you're going to bring a knife, you got to make sure that it's not going to be cutting through your backpack or cutting yourself. You'll want some sort of eating utensil. So I use a spork, but depending on how light you want to go, you can also just bring a spoon and a fork, depending on what you're eating. Something to eat out of. So I've also just brought like straight up Tupperware. Tupperware is great because it's a bowl you can eat out of, and anything you don't finish, you put the cap on and it's your lunch for the next day. There's also a foldable bowl option, and a few brands make these. They're great because you can lay them flat as a plate. You can also fold them up like a bowl. And then I also put one of just like my favorite items because I love the word, spondonical, which is the technical term for this little metal piece that helps you grip hot pots. So if your pot doesn't come with a thermal protected handle, you can get a spondonical for a few dollars, and then you can also say the word spondonical for a reason, and it's just fun. And then also, if you're in bear country, you're going to want to bring a bear canister. I pack all my food and kitchen supplies inside my bear canister because otherwise it's very bulky inside your backpack. You can also, there's other ways to keep bear safe at camp, like putting your food into a sleeping bag stuff sack and slinging it up a tree, but that's not always an option. I usually just opt for a bear canister. In order to figure out how much fuel you want to bring, you need to know how much cooking you're going to be doing. I'm not going to go in depth. You can actually find this on REI's backpacking info page. Then also you just revisit this video, but essentially I've never brought more than one fuel canister with me, but I also generally don't go out for more than 2 to 3 days backpacking. So this is just like a handy way to figure out how much fuel you actually need to bring with you. And the last essential is first aid. So I could do a whole talk on what to put in a first aid kit. I actually used to teach wilderness first aid. And it's really fun, and I super encourage everybody to look on wilderness medicine website. And if you go to adventuremedicalkits.com, they have a lot of informative stuff as well. These medical kits are great because they're in a water-resistant container, and they only include as much as you would need for the allotted amount of time that they print on the outside of the bag, so you're not carrying around all this excess stuff. Some important things I do want to mention that might not be included in a kit that you buy. You always want to have emergency contacts written down. If they're in your phone might die, so you need to make sure that they're written down. It's also good to have a written down egress plan. So what that means is looking at a map, what's the fastest way to get out of the wilderness if we had to do so? So that's not always just turning around and coming back on the trail that you went in. A lot of times you're hiking really close to fire roads, and so knowing that is really helpful. And if you did pick up a paper map, you can always highlight those egress points. So if you ever need to get out, you know, like where's the nearest exit. More important than having medical supplies is to have medical training. That doesn't mean that you have to have a certification of any kind, but just doing some research and knowing like how to use these things, because if you don't know how to use them, they're not really going to help you. So I would highly suggest taking a course in wilderness medicine. And if you're not interested in that, it's really accessible online. There's a lot of Wilderness Medical Society has a lot of educational stuff on their website, and it's just really fun to learn how to keep you and your friends safe on the trail. I also recommend bringing a whistle, which is a great way to indicate if you're in trouble. And it's also, if you plan out kind of a pattern with your friends, you can communicate if you ever get too distant on the trail. So, 3 loud whistle blows means that you need help. I've also done like 1 means are you okay, and 1 back means I'm okay. And then I know this is not really a first aid item, but I treat it like one. Having a headlamp to me is so important. I actually bring it on even my short hikes. If you get lost or you sprain an ankle and things just like aren't going as planned, you're moving slower, it's always good to know that peace of mind that, okay, if it gets dark, I'll at least be able to see. So this is like a must-have for me at least. Next, I'll go into clothing, and really, I will talk about the things that I can't live without, and also my favorite fabrics. Most of you guys probably know what you like and like to wear on the trail and what you're comfortable with. My tip would be to stay away from cotton. So if you're doing anything long where you feel like you might be sweating or you might be exposed to the elements, cotton, when it gets wet, stays wet and it stays cold. So I usually opt for a wool or wool blend, or any of the synthetic fabrics that you see in a lot of outdoor stores, like polyester and nylon work great as well. Look for keywords like wicking, quick drying, and anti-odor. Those are great performance features for any of your equipment. Things that I cannot go without. So right now, I bring a mask on all my hikes, even though I might not be wearing it the whole time or sharing the trail with people. So I always have a mask with me. I also always bring, if I'm going backpacking, I'll always bring an additional pair of wool socks that I wouldn't necessarily think to pack. Like if I think I need 2 socks for the trip, I'll bring 3 socks for the trip. Nothing's worse than hiking in wet socks. I also always bring a beanie if I'm going backpacking, because even if it doesn't get too cold, you lose most of your heat from your head, your hands, and your feet. So if you're in a sleeping bag, your head is the only thing that's not getting warmth, and you lose a lot of heat through your head. So I bring a beanie. And then I also usually bring some sort of sun protection hat. So sunscreen is amazing. Always bring sunscreen, but nothing will protect you quite like the brim of a hat. Now we'll get into equipment. So there's tons of tents on the market. If you're going backpacking, all you have to do is on any website, whatever brand it is, just look for the backpacking tent. Backpacking tents are different than standard car camping tents because they're a lot lighter weight. They'll also usually have smaller sleep space, so you might have to get cozier than normal, but you'll be happy to do so because it'll be a lot less weight to carry in your backpack. And for backpacks, the way that the sizing works is there's a size of the frame, which has to do with how tall you are, but then the other size is the capacity, the holding capacity of the bag. So the general rule is 1 to 3 nights is about 30 to 50 liters. 3 to 5 nights is 50 to 80 liters. And over 5 nights, you're gonna want something 70 liters or more. For sleeping bags, you can use a down sleeping bag, which is made out of feathers, or one that's filled with a synthetic insulation. Both work perfectly fine. Something to know is that a synthetic bag will pack down bigger than a down bag. The down bag is more squishable, so it'll take up less room in your backpack. Down typically cannot get wet. If the feathers get wet, they clump and then they won't keep you warm. Now we have feathers that are treated with a DWR coating, which is basically a coating that is hydrophobic, so it doesn't get soaked with water, but not every down bag has that treatment. So in general, the synthetic bags are better for any kind of wet conditions that you might be in. And then for the sleeping pad, there's foam sleeping pads and inflatable sleeping pads. And the thing that you need to look at, regardless of which pad, both foam pads and inflatable pads come in different options, but the R value basically tells you how warm it's going to keep you. So a lot of people don't know this, but the pad is actually just as important as the sleeping bag at keeping you warm. You lose a lot of warmth between your body and the earth. So the R values are 1 through 3 for warm sleeping. 3 through 5 R value is for 3-season sleeping, which means everything but winter. And then if you're going to be sleeping outside in the winter, you're going to want something with an R value of 5 or higher. And lastly, I have the toiletries, which are kind of essentials in my opinion. So I bring with me toilet paper, and so I would not bring this whole roll. I would take a little bit of toilet paper out and then I put it in a plastic bag in my backpack. I bring a few plastic bags, which are great for collecting any trash that I create or any trash that I find on the trail. I also bring wipes, which are great for washing my face, washing my hands, and also sanitizer for sanitizing before I cook any meals or eat or after I use the bathroom. I bring sunscreen and then a toothbrush and toothpaste. A fun trick for cutting down weight on a toothbrush is to just break a toothbrush in half, because you don't actually need the whole handle, but that's kind of like if you're going aggressively lightweight. Yeah, and that's it for me.
Okay, if anyone has any questions for Aaliyah, please enter them in the chat box now.
Okay, I'm getting some great questions. Let's see. Freeze-dried food is great too. Freeze-dried fruit, wow, that's hard to say, is awesome. Any dehydrated fruit is great. I also like using powdered foods like powdered milk, powdered hummus. What about camping in hammocks? I actually love to camp in hammocks, and I geek out on it a lot. So I use a hammock. If I'm using a hammock, I always have a tarp with me because a hammock doesn't come with any kind of shade shelter structure. But something to keep in mind with hammocks is that it's usually really helpful to have an underquilt because you lose a lot of heat from the bottom of the hammock. Would I bring soap? I don't bring soap with me. I just bring wipes and hand sanitizer. If you do bring soap, it's really important that it is biodegradable and not going to be harmful to any of our waterways. Is it possible to pack too many things? Well, I would say always err on the side of overpacking. It's always better to, get a better workout and carry too much. But only to a certain extent, right? You don't want to be out on the trail and your back is hurting and you're only using 50% of the stuff that's in your bag. But at the same time, it's better to have and not use than to really need something and not have it. Does any backpack work for backpacking if it's big enough? It depends on the trip and it depends on, I guess, how you feel in the backpack. The difference between a backpacking backpack and a regular backpack is that the frame is built so that the majority of the weight is on your hips, which takes a lot of the stress out of your back. So a big backpack might contain all of your items, but it might really hurt your back. My favorite hydration pack is from Camelback. And one of my favorite meals is to bring dehydrated hummus and chop out a bunch of carrots and peppers. Do you need a bag with a frame? I wouldn't say you need any of the things unless they're the essentials. I think that you could, depending on how supportive this backpack is, it might be okay. But I would highly suggest looking into getting a frame bag because it'll be hard on your back if you're carrying too much weight. If I bring my phone, I bring a extra battery, a battery pack, but I do try to stay off my phone as much as possible when I'm outside. I use it for checking Strava or my map and taking pictures, but I don't use too much of the battery because I'm not like texting or calling or anything.
If we're winding down on questions, we can.
How do you know if your soap is biodegradable? I would hope it's on the label. I would look into Dr. Bronner's. They have some good soap, but there are soaps specifically meant for camping or hiking.
We can pick a couple more. If anyone has any questions.
I do not bring hiking poles, but a lot of people do bring hiking poles, and I think they're great, you know, if you need a little extra support. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Great questions. Here we go. All right, we're handing it back off to Cosmic. I think she has an update about the sunscreen, and she's going to talk to us about training.
I went and I found my sunscreen. So this is the sunscreen I use. It is from King Soopers. It is their, it's like their, what's it called, organic brand. And it's like, I don't know. It's the nice thing about it. When you look for sunscreen, look for stuff that has zinc oxide in it because that is more protective. I don't know for sure why, but I have read that, and I'm sorry I didn't prepare more about the sunscreen. I'm so glad you guys are interested though. So yes, I just got this at King Soopers. So ooh, that was loud on my computer. I have a couple things that I got so excited I forgot to mention. So things to consider, someone mentioned to me, bag up your sunscreen, and that is good for a couple reasons. One, you don't want it to leak on the inside of your backpack. And two, if you're hiking at higher elevation, things can explode. That is something that can happen, is the pressure builds up when you go up to higher elevation. For some of you that are maybe trying to tackle that 2,000 plus feet gain in elevation challenge on the badge, you're going to want to consider, like, have you hiked at elevation before, and how was it when you did hike at elevation? Because some people get altitude sickness if they've never done that. And you're going to want to drink more water when you're at elevation. I wish I knew the exact science why, but it's definitely true, and I'm sorry I was not prepared on that front. But you're definitely going to want to drink more water when you're at high elevation. Just because your body needs a lot more, because it's harder to breathe up there. There's just, your body needs more. And going to the bathroom is different when you're up at high elevation. If you are up above tree line, it's best not to pee, and that's a weird thing, but it just doesn't decompose the same. So I won't get too much into it. If you're going to be hiking really high up into the elevation, you're going to be hiking high elevation stuff, just do a little bit more research on like what that might entail. And backpacking, sometimes you need permits. Almost always you need permits. There are a few wilderness areas where you don't need any permits. One off the top of my head is James Peak Wilderness, but there is a lot, like the vast majority of places, especially the places that are really cool, you do need permits. So national parks and wilderness areas, a lot of them do require that. Just do a Google search on the place you're thinking of hiking. And you can also look into booking campsites online. A lot of places do online reservations. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about this stuff, and then I do have a picture to show you guys, but I'll share that in a second. And I'm getting so many good, thank you all for like all of the good comments and questions. I will get back to that in a second. So fueling your body, this seems really silly. And I know I said eat and hydrate before, like during and after, and I know it's kind of goofy how I typed that out, but it is so important. As I got older, I realized that I get like headaches if I don't drink enough water or eat enough food. So it's really important that like before you go on a hike, you eat something that's pretty substantial. You can eat donuts or cereal, or really you can eat whatever beforehand or nothing. There's just certain things that are more hearty will make it more enjoyable for you to hike. So one thing I would recommend avoiding is dairy. I don't exactly know what it is, but it just kind of sits in your rock like a stomach. Sits in your stomach like a rock when you're hiking, and it's not very fun. So I would maybe avoid that. If you drink coffee, go and get some nice coffee afterwards, because if you drink coffee before, it will really increase the chances that you will be dehydrated. Someone told me this in wilderness first aid, and I am not sure if it's actually true. The teacher told me this. I never actually did more research on it, but he said that when you drink coffee, it makes it so that your body can't actually take in more water for like a certain period of time. So I don't know if that's actually true, but I feel much better if I don't drink coffee till afterwards. During, just bring like, you know, some protein bars. Really all the stuff Aaliyah was talking about is like really nice stuff to have, even if you're doing like a long day hike. So those are all great recommendations. And then afterwards, like I said, I always go get coffee after I go on a hike. It just makes me feel good, and it kind of re-energizes me for the rest of the day. And then I'm not dehydrated because of it. So that's great. And just keep drinking water literally the whole time. Even if you think you've had enough water, just have some more water afterwards, just for fun. You'll feel a lot better later and the next day because of it. So I'm going to talk about setting training goals and creating training plans. So cadets, I know that it broke down in the badge requirements, like 3 possible goals for you. I usually don't have a specific goal when I'm hiking. My goal is just to, if someone asks me if I want to go on a hike, I want to be able to say with confidence, yes, I can go on that hike. And you guys are probably training for something more specific. When I train for something more specific, I kind of break it down. And the best way to train for hiking is just to go hike more, or the best way to train for trail running is to go run more. And I know that's not always possible. So one thing I do when I can't get too far away from where I live is I will just try and do like little runs in the morning. I'll like run a mile as many times in the week as I can. I really hate running, but I like running a little bit more if it's for a reason. So if I'm telling myself I'm training for hiking, that just really helps build up your lung capacity. So I've found that to be really helpful. You can put your backpack on either your day hiking bag or your backpacking bag and go walk some stairs, either like you have stairs in your house or nearby. Just go up and down some stairs because you're going to be gaining some elevation and you're going to want to know how everything feels. Those are just some general training tips. I don't want to tell you specifically how to train because we also don't have that much time to get into it. But I am going to show you a really cool resource, which is Strava. I don't know how many of you have heard of Strava. I actually didn't start using it until recently. I guess I'm sharing this. I forgot the order that I put the slides in. I'm going to talk about Strava first, and then I'll come back to some other ways that you can track things. Hooray. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, Ashley. Let's see. All right, so here's kind of what Strava looks like on a computer. Strava is a great way to track pretty much everything. It was originally like a running and cycling app, but I use it for hiking because I think it's great. It's got a lot of functionality. When you go on the computer, I really like how it looks on the computer better than on the phone, so I use it on here. If you get the app on your phone, you can open it when you go to start hiking or trail running or backpacking, and you can track your hike using the GPS on your phone or a friend's phone or a parent's phone. When you do that, so I'll show you, so this is just kind of what it looks like. It's got a lot of really cool things for if you're trying to like set weekly goals for yourself or monthly goals. So for me, I can go and I can see like, oh, these are all the activities that I did in this date range. I upload photos sometimes because I think it's fun to see them. It shows me all my stats on the side, which I guess I haven't really been doing that much lately, so it's not going to be that impressive. Sorry, everybody. The really helpful tab is the training tab. So that's where I go to look at all my old activities on Strava. And then it just pops all of them up. I track all of my walks as well. Like I'll walk around the neighborhood and I'll track it just so I remember how much I've walked. And I also track rock climbing on here. Very cool. I'll show you guys a hike that I did. This was Lake Dorothy in Indian Peaks Wilderness, my personal favorite hike ever. I did it recently. So let's see, it shows me my total mileage, my moving time. This is like how much time you're actually moving, my actual time. It took me 4 hours and 42 minutes. I brought my camera and I got really excited, stopped a lot. And it shows me my pace, which is cool. This is a really cool thing about Strava. It shows you like your map, which I love seeing, and it shows you mile by mile what your pace was and then how much elevation you gained or lost. And it highlights the segment for you. Down here, you can take a look at your pace, and there's just like a lot to look at here, so I won't be able to explain all of it. I'm very sorry. But on here, it's showing me my pace in blue, the elevation profile in gray behind there. And then I have a little GPS watch that tracks my heart rate as well. So I have it track my heart rate. And I don't remember what cadence is, but it tracks that also. So lots of cool things to look at. It also, if you take a picture along the way on Strava and you upload it to there, it will show you the picture. So here is where I hiked to. It was beautiful. I would highly recommend this hike. But yeah, so Strava is really awesome, and I know I'm kind of like going really fast, but there's just a lot of exciting things. So I'm gonna stop sharing this and tell you guys some other ways to keep track of your hikes if you maybe don't have access to a GPS device, which I recognize that not everybody does. I'm a little crazy about tracking my hikes, so I do it in like 5 different ways. One way is totally sufficient if you're training for something. So one way that I track, I use an Excel sheet, and I put in the mileage and the elevation gain, the date that I did it, and any additional notes. And I've done that for the last 5 years. So you can also do this in a notebook if you don't have access to a computer. When I take a paper map, I will take like a Sharpie and highlight the route that I have taken. And I usually have 2 copies of that map, one that I use actually on the trail and one that I use to track my hikes. So if you live right by an open space park and for your training, you set the goal of, I'm gonna do every hike in this park, that's a great way to keep track of which trails you've done. That doesn't require any like technology whatsoever. Next slide, I think there might be a picture from Strava in here still, or I might have taken it out. Oh no, this is really cool. So when I track something in Strava, I am a huge nerd. I then export that GPS data to Google Earth so that I can see on the Earth all of the hikes that I've done. I just wanted to share that with you guys because I think it's really cool, but that's another way that I track my hikes. So yeah. Definitely practice using your gear before you go on a hike. That is super important. And like, even if it's just, you know, like one of your training hikes, that's a great time to practice using your gear. You really don't want the first time you use something to be on whatever trip that you're taking. That's just a good general rule. Don't forget about doing warm-up and cool-down activities. Like you can see over here, if any of you are actually in the Outdoor Adventure Club and you're in this picture, You're in the slideshow. But this is from our Outdoor Adventure Club hike to Mount Quandary, which is a 14er. This is our dear friend Sunshine leading us in some morning calisthenics. Everybody was kind of giggling, but it's very important that you kind of like, jump around, move around. If you're going on like a hike that's farther away from home, you probably just sat in the car for a really long time, and then you're not going to want to start hiking right away. Same thing for cool down. Usually the first thing I do after I'm done with a long hike is I hop back in the car and then I sit for like an hour while I drive back home, and then my legs hurt. So just make sure you shake everything out before you like get back in the car. And then maybe later that night when you get back from like a long day hike or something, or after your backpacking trip, walk around a little bit, just like do a lap around your neighborhood. It'll help you because you'll be really sore the next day. It helps you be less sore when you do that. So I know that was a little bit much. I do want to share one other picture that I thought about when Aaliyah was talking about gear. So I used to not hike at all. I had no like prior experience. I decided I wanted to go on a backpacking trip, and I had just like really never done it before. So I'm going to show you guys. This is from my first backpacking trip ever. This is me and my friend. I'm going to tell you what I am wearing. I am wearing my $13 thrift store hiking boots that ripped on this trip. One of them is duct taped, but you can't see. These are men's hiking pants from Costco, because I guess at Costco they don't sell women's hiking pants. So I bought some men's hiking pants because they were cheap and because they were what was there. My mom didn't want this jacket anymore, so I took it. And this is like a $10 beanie from Target. So it can be a little overwhelming when there's lots of gear and you feel like you don't have anything, but really like the fancy gear is just like really fun and you don't necessarily need it. When you get like more into it, you're gonna be like, how did I ever do it without this? But like you totally can. And I just wanted to touch on that. So yeah, first backpacking trip ever. Someone is drawing on my screen. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing that. Okay, I'm gonna take any questions. I'm sorry, I just wanted to like mention that like it might be a little, I hope you don't feel a little overwhelmed. That was not the goal. We are trying to help you, so yeah. I'm gonna look at my chat box now. Do I have a little bit of time? I really don't.
That's okay. We will take a few questions for Cosmic if you have any.
Okay, I've got a few good ones. Do you have to pay for the app I showed? None of the resources I showed you today you have to pay for. There are like paid versions of them, but I've never like bought a pro version of an app. I've always just used the basic. Is spray sunscreen good? Yeah, spray sunscreen is totally fine. I definitely have spray sunscreen. Does Reef sunscreen, you guys are like killing it with the sunscreen questions. Does Reef sunscreen, like do you need Reef safe sunscreen? No, not necessarily. If you're not like anywhere near the beach, it's like really important if you're going in like the ocean, but I just found this and it happened to be reef safe. Usually, unless you're like gonna get out and swim in like a body of water, you're probably gonna be fine. Doesn't need to be reef safe. Do I fish for hikes? Do I fish on my hikes for food? I wish. That sounds super cool. I really want to get into fishing, but I don't know anything about it yet. Definitely not for food, but would be cool. What is my favorite 14er? Mount Belford so far. Really cool 14er. Not as many people as one of the Front Range ones, but it was one of the hardest hikes I've ever done. Do I forget some of the things I pack or am supposed to pack? Absolutely. Every single time. I always forget at least one thing. I'm sure Ashley and Aaliyah maybe had these same experiences, but I almost always forget something. So it's okay. It'll happen and you'll figure it out because your Girl Scouts and Girl Scouts are like always prepared. So, or they're always going to figure something out. Do you know how much weight a day and night backpacking trip will be? Really depends on where you're going. One thing, if you're going to a place that has lots of bears and you have a bear canister, those things are heavy and they take up like your entire backpack. But if you're going somewhere where there's not a lot of bears, could be a lot less weight. And you can do things personally to like add or subtract weight. I'm not gonna get too much into it. Okay, cool. I think I like really quickly got through all the questions I had. So, and I'm sorry if I forgot some of them.
It's okay.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. If there's anything else.
All right. I'm going to wrap us up. I'm bringing us home. All right, step 5, last step of your badge is to go on your adventure. So like Cosmic said, make sure you're doing your final checks. Check your weather for the last time. Check your gear, like she mentioned. If you haven't set up your tent in a long time, if you haven't busted out that camp stove in a long time, try that stuff. Set up your tent. Make sure it still works before you go out. Make sure there's no holes in your tent before you leave. And then make sure that you've told someone where you're going and you've done all of your last safety checks. And then remember when you're out on your adventure to follow, leave no trace. Okay, like I mentioned before, I already said this, but I'm going to say it again. This recording will be posted to the Girl Scouts of Colorado YouTube page. I will send a link in about a week or so to registered participants with a link to the recording, the activity packet, and the badge request form. And the last thing is I have one more poll that I'm going to share right now. So as you're leaving, please feel free to vote on that poll. Tell us in the chat box what your biggest takeaway was from this webinar. And if you have any final questions, you can enter them in the chat box now. And the last thing that I will say is happy hiking, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And we are really excited for you to get out and earn your Trail Adventure badge this fall. I'm going to stop the recording now.